It was the day after Christmas, 1996. Boulder, Colorado, a quiet, picturesque town nestled against the Rockies, where the snow that morning looked almost too perfect. Inside one of the homes on 15th Street, the holiday decorations still glimmered. The stockings were hung, the wrapping paper was still scattered around the living room, and the Ramsey family was waking up to what they thought would be another peaceful morning after the holidays. But within hours, that illusion of peace would shatter, replaced by fear, confusion, and one of the most haunting mysteries America has ever seen: fade of ambient snowfall sound. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey, a 6-year-old girl whose name became known around the world, not for the bright, smiling pageant star she was, but for the dark, unanswered questions surrounding her death. And if you're fascinated by real-life mysteries, cold cases, and the search for truth, make sure you're subscribed. Because here, we don't just tell the story, we uncover it. Now let's go back to Christmas Day. The Ramsey family, John, Patsy, Burke, and JonBenét, had spent Christmas Day celebrating with friends. The kind of evening where the kids played until they were too tired to keep their eyes open, and the adults talked long into the night about the year that had been. John was a successful businessman, the president of Access Graphics, a computer company that had just passed the $1 billion mark. Patsy, his wife, was a former beauty queen, Miss West Virginia, known for her southern charm and pride in her family. Their home on 15th Street was big, elegant, the kind of place that showed their success. 5 bedrooms, a grand staircase, a wine cellar in the basement. That Christmas night, JonBenét was asleep by 10 p.m. The Ramseys went to bed shortly after. And then, sometime between that night and the next morning, something went terribly wrong. At around 5:30 a.m. on December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey woke up. She planned to make coffee before the family's early flight to Michigan, but when she walked down the spiral staircase, she noticed something odd at the bottom step: a 3-page handwritten letter. At first, she thought it might have been a joke or maybe something from a friend, but as her eyes scanned the words, a cold wave ran through her. It was a ransom note. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country it serves. It went on for nearly 400 words, unusually long for a ransom note. It demanded $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return, the exact amount John had received as a bonus that year. The letter ended with a chilling warning: "Don't try to grow a brain, John." Patsy screamed. Moments later, the entire house was awake. John rushed through every room. Burke, their 9-year-old son, stayed in his room, and JonBenét was nowhere to be found. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey called 911. Her voice trembled as she told the operator, "We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please." The dispatcher tried to calm her down, but something about the call would later draw endless analysis. Experts and internet sleuths would replay it again and again, pointing to pauses, background noises, and a faint whisper that some believed was Burke's voice. When police arrived, the house was already chaotic. Friends and neighbors had come over to comfort Patsy. People were walking through rooms, touching things, and unintentionally destroying potential evidence. It was a scene no investigator ever wants to walk into, a compromised crime scene before crime had even been identified. Detective Linda Arndt was among the first officers to arrive. She told John Ramsey to keep himself busy, to look for anything out of place. By early afternoon, there was still no sign of JonBenét. And then John made a discovery that would change everything. In the basement, down a narrow corridor known as the wine cellar, John found his daughter's body, wrapped in a white blanket, with a piece of duct tape over her mouth and a garrote fashioned from a paintbrush handle around her neck. He lifted her and carried her upstairs, screaming her name. In that single moment, the case went from a possible kidnapping to a confirmed homicide, but crucial evidence was now contaminated. When the coroner arrived, the scene was surreal. A child beauty queen, just 6 years old, found dead in her own home the morning after Christmas. News spread quickly through Boulder, and within hours, across the entire country. The public saw a perfect family shattered, a mother in despair, a father broken, a town in disbelief. But beneath the surface, the story didn't add up. Why was the ransom note written on paper from inside the Ramsey house? Why was it so long? And why did it demand such a specific amount of money? And why did it seem like there were no signs of forced entry? Almost immediately, the investigation began to fracture. The Boulder Police Department believed the Ramseys were hiding something, but the Ramseys insisted an intruder had broken in. Two sides of a mystery, both convinced they were right. Detectives noticed handwriting similarities between the ransom note and Patsy's writing, but the tests were inconclusive. John's fingerprints were found on the note, though he claimed he had picked it up when it was first discovered, and the ransom note itself, 3 pages long, was something most experts had never seen before. Some thought it was a staged attempt to disguise the real motive. Others believed it might have been written in panic, a desperate cover-up. The coroner's report revealed haunting details. JonBenét had suffered a skull fracture and was strangled with a cord. There were signs suggesting she might have been struck first, then strangled later. The presence of undigested pineapple in her stomach hinted she'd eaten shortly before her death, a clue that would become strangely important. Near her body, police found a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table, with Burke's fingerprint on it. When questioned, the Ramseys couldn't recall giving JonBenét pineapple that night. It raised one more question. If she was asleep when she was taken, how did the pineapple get there? By January, the media had descended on Boulder. TV vans lined the streets. Tabloids ran wild headlines. Beauty queen murdered. Mother suspecting daughter's death. Every photograph of JonBenét in a tiara and sequin dress fueled a frenzy, and blurred the line between victim and spectacle. Patsy Ramsey, still grieving, appeared in public wearing bright makeup and pearls, the same image people had seen in pageants. The media ripped her apart for it. John and Patsy hired lawyers. They stopped cooperating with police interviews, claiming harassment, and from that moment, the relationship between the family and investigators broke down completely. America became obsessed. Talk shows, newspapers, late-night hosts, everyone had a theory. Some were convinced the Ramseys were guilty. Others saw them as victims of a botched investigation. There were whispers that the ransom note was Patsy's way of writing her way out of crime. Others said an intruder had broken in through a basement window, that a stranger had been watching JonBenét for weeks. The truth? Still hidden. In the days that followed, Boulder police made several critical errors. Evidence went missing. Statements were taken inconsistently. And soon, it became nearly impossible to separate fact from theory. By the time 1997 arrived, one thing was clear. This case was no longer just a tragedy. It was a storm, a public obsession that would last for decades. AIDS. In the weeks after JonBenét Ramsey's death, Boulder wasn't just a small mountain town anymore. It became the epicenter of one of the most scrutinized investigations in American history. Police officers were working around the clock, journalists camped outside the Ramsey home, and the public, well, they'd already chosen sides. But behind the cameras, something even more troubling was happening. The people meant to solve the case couldn't agree on how to investigate it. Boulder's police department wasn't prepared for something like this. They were used to small-town crimes, not a high-profile murder in a mansion with national attention. The case quickly split the authorities into two camps: those who believed the Ramseys were guilty, and those convinced an intruder had broken in. From that point forward, every piece of evidence, every interview, every photograph was interpreted through one of those lenses. The Ramsey home was enormous, over 7,000 square feet, with multiple levels and hidden rooms. Investigators began combing through it, looking for answers in every crevice. In the basement, they found that a small window had been broken, possibly from months earlier when John Ramsey had accidentally broken himself. But there were also signs someone could have crawled through it. A scuff mark on the wall, a suitcase beneath the window, positioned as if to be stepped on. Some officers believed this was the intruder's entry point. Others dismissed it, saying there was too much dust on the sill and no footprints in the snow outside. It was yet another contradiction. The ransom note, that infamous 3-page letter, became the center of everything. Handwriting experts were called in to compare samples from both John and Patsy Ramsey. The results? Mixed. Out of 6 experts, said there were similarities between Patsy's handwriting and the ransom note, but none could say it was a match. And that raised a deeper question. Who writes a ransom note inside the very house of the person they're kidnapping? Tests revealed that the notepad and pen used for the note came from inside the Ramsey home. There was even a practice note, a partial draft found in the trash. The tone of the note was dramatic, even theatrical. If you talk to anyone, she dies, the delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. It read more like a movie script than a genuine ransom demand. As days turned into weeks, the Ramseys found themselves under a microscope. Their every move, every word, was being dissected. When Patsy and John finally gave interviews, they appeared emotional but controlled. Patsy repeatedly said, "There's a killer out there," to the public. That line became polarizing. Some saw a grieving mother seeking justice. Others saw a woman distancing herself from responsibility. Then came the police interviews, long, grueling sessions filled with inconsistencies. Investigators asked why Patsy had gone straight to the ransom note that morning instead of checking JonBenét's room first. Why the 911 call included certain phrases like, "We have a kidnapping," instead of "My daughter's been taken." It may sound trivial, but in high-stakes cases, words matter. And the more she spoke, the more suspicion grew. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, barely appeared in the public eye after the murder. For months, he was shielded from reporters. But behind closed doors, investigators wanted answers. During his police interviews, Burke appeared calm, almost too calm. When asked about that night, he said he stayed in bed and didn't hear anything unusual. But that pineapple, the bowl left on the kitchen table with his fingerprints, kept coming up. If he was asleep, how did his fingerprints end up there? And who gave JonBené the fruit she ate before she died? To this day, that one detail, a bowl of pineapple, remains one of the case's strangest CLU. Yes, the friction between Boulder's police and the district attorney's office only made things worse. Police Chief Tom Colby and District Attorney Alex Hunter disagreed constantly. The DA's office thought the police were too focused on the parents. The police thought the DA was protecting them. The Ramseys hired private investigators and attorneys who ran their own analysis, a move that angered law enforcement even more. By 1997, the investigation was at a standstill, and in the middle of it all was a family shattered by grief and suspicion. The media couldn't look away. Those pageant videos of JonBenét, dancing, singing, wearing tiaras, played on every network. To some, it was an innocent glimpse of a talented little girl. To others, it was unsettling. The narrative began to shift, not just from who did it, but why. Was this the result of obsession? Was it the dark side of child pageantry? Or was it simply the tragedy of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? The tabloids twisted every angle they could find. And while the headlines sold, the truth grew even harder to reach. Then, years later, science stepped in. Forensic testing on JonBenét's clothing revealed unknown male DNA that didn't match anyone in the Ramsey family. This discovery reignited the intruder theory. If this DNA belonged to a stranger, it could mean someone really did break in that night. But even this wasn't definitive. Experts debated whether the DNA could have come from contamination, perhaps in the factory where her clothing was made. It was one step forward and two steps BA. CK. Over time, the intruder theory gained its own momentum. Private investigators believed an unknown man may have entered the basement through that broken window, subdued JonBenét, and left without waking anyone. They pointed to marks on her body that looked like those made by a stun gun, although that was never proven. There was also a footprint near her body, one that didn't match anyone in the family. And yet, skeptics argued, if an intruder came to kidnap her, why leave a ransom note written inside the house? Why not take her away? And most chilling of all, why kill her at all? In 2006, nearly a decade later, a man named John Mark Carr confessed to JonBenét's murder. He claimed he was with her when she died and described the scene in disturbing detail. But when investigators tested his DNA, it didn't match. He was dismissed as a delusional attention seeker. It was yet another false ending in a case that refused to close. By the early 2000s, the Ramsey family had moved away from Boulder. They gave interviews, wrote books, and tried to rebuild their lives, all while living under a cloud of suspicion. In 2008, the district attorney's office formally cleared John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey, citing the DNA evidence. But public opinion didn't change overnight. Patsy Ramsey passed away from ovarian cancer in 2006, still proclaiming her innocence. John Ramsey, in later years, continued to push for new testing, new technology, and real closure. Decades later, the JonBenét Ramsey case remains one of the most infamous unsolved murders in America. It changed how the public viewed small-town police work. It exposed how the media could turn tragedy into spectacle. And it left behind a trail of unanswered questions that still haunt every detective who's ever touched a file. JonBenét would be 34 years old today. Instead, she's forever frozen in those images, smiling on a stage, wearing a crown, waving to the crowd, a symbol of innocence. A reminder of how quickly a story can turn into a nightmare. But what really happened inside that Boulder mansion? Who wrote that ransom note? Who left DNA that still can't be identified? Theories are all that remain. Some believe it was an intruder. Some still believe someone inside that house knows more than they've ever said. And between those two theories lies the truth, buried somewhere in the cold shadows of that Colorado winter. Time has a way of burying evidence, but it never buries questions. Nearly 3 decades later, the JonBenét Ramsey case still stands as one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. A case frozen between fact and theory, grief and obsession, truth and silence. So as we close this story, we're not here to solve it. We're here to understand it. Let's start with the most controversial and enduring theory, that one or both of JonBenét's parents were involved. From the very beginning, police believed a ransom note was staged to mislead investigators. The reasoning was simple. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints in snow, and the ransom note came from inside the house. Some detectives theorized that JonBenét may have suffered a head injury, perhaps accidentally, and the Ramseys panicked, tried to cover it up as a kidnapping gone wrong. They pointed to inconsistencies in the family statements, the odd phrasing in the ransom note, and the decision to call friends before police had even finished searching the home. There's also that pineapple bowl, the one with Burke's fingerprints. Was there a late-night snack that turned into something tragic? The idea remains unproven. But for many, the sheer improbability of an intruder entering the home unnoticed keeps suspicion on the people inside it. A darker variation of the first theory centers on JonBenét's older brother, Burke Ramsey. He was only 9 years old at the time, a child himself, but some armchair detectives and even a few professionals wondered, could JonBenét's death have been an accident caused by a sibling dispute? This theory suggests that Burke may have hit JonBenét, possibly over that bowl of pineapple, and that their parents, horrified, staged the scene to protect him. It's speculation built largely on circumstantial details and tone from interviews. In 2016, when Burke finally gave his first televised interview, viewers analyzed every smile, every pause, every movement. But psychology isn't evidence, and no physical proof has ever tied Burke to the crime. Today, he maintains his complete innocence, and in legal terms, he's been cleared. Still, the whispers never fully disappeared. Then there's the other side, the intruder theory. Supporters point to the unidentified male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing. DNA that didn't match anyone in the Ramsey family or their close circle. They highlight that broken basement window, the suitcase on the sill, and an open window latch found nearby. Some even believe the killer had been watching the Ramseys for days, maybe weeks. Perhaps someone who'd been inside the house before, a family friend, a worker, a delivery man. There was also a boot print found near JonBenét's body that didn't belong to anyone in the family. Each piece feels like a breadcrumb, but none of them lead to a name. The intruder theory gained strength when modern DNA testing advanced. Yet every time investigators think they're close, the trail seems to vanish aga. In the 2000s, as true crime forums exploded online, JonBenét's case became one of the internet's original mysteries. People spent nights dissecting the ransom note, voice tones from a 911 call, even the exact brand of duct tape used. There were homemade documentaries, Reddit threads, and self-declared experts trying to connect dots the police had missed. But with every new theory, more noise filled the conversation, making truth harder to hear. The internet turned JonBenét into a myth, not just a victim, but a story people couldn't let go of. And maybe that's part why this case endures. Because everyone, deep down, wants to be the one who solves it. Even the detectives who worked the case admit mistakes were made. The crime scene was never properly sealed. Friends and family walked freely through the house before forensics arrived. The body was moved, crucial evidence lost. Had the scene been locked down immediately, the mystery might not have lasted this long. But the Boulder Police Department was small, unprepared for this level of scrutiny, and overwhelmed by the media storm. They did what they could. But in cases like this, what they could is never enough. No story shaped modern true crime media quite like JonBenét Ramsey's. Every network wanted exclusives. Every tabloid printed speculation. There were covers that blurred fact and fiction, accusing parents, inventing suspects, feeding a nation's appetite for drama. And behind those headlines was a family drowning in grief, blamed for something no one could prove. It became a lesson in how media can distort reality. How, in the absence of answers, outrage becomes entertainment. Today, the case sits in a kind of limbo. In 2022, JonBenét's father once again petitioned to have the DNA retested using new technology, hoping for a match through modern genealogy databases, like the one that caught the Golden State Killer. The Boulder police say they're still investigating, but with time, memories fade, evidence degrades, and leads dry up. Still, hope remains, because if the science ever catches up, if that DNA is matched, this mystery might finally find its ending. For the Ramsey family, life never returned to normal. Patsy died in 2006, still insisting, "We loved our daughter. We did not kill her." John remarried years later, but continues to advocate for reopening the investigation with fresh eyes. Burke lives quietly, rarely speaking publicly about what happened. And yet, for all the silence, one thing remains unspoken but clear. Their lives were changed forever by what happened that night in Boulder. When you step back from all the evidence, all the theories, all the noise, what's left is a single truth. A 6-year-old girl was taken from the world before she had the chance to live it. JonBenét was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a child who loved to sing and dress up, who believed in Santa Claus, and who fell asleep that Christmas night surrounded by love. Whatever happened in those early morning hours of December 26, 1996, the real tragedy is that she became a mystery before she could become a memory. So we're left with two realities: the facts we know, and the truth we'll never be sure of. But maybe one day someone will find that missing piece. One fingerprint, one hair, one overlooked clue that tells a story no one else could. Until then, the JonBenét Ramsey case remains open in the files and in our collective conscience. Because when a story like this refuses to end, it's not just a case. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. If you've stayed with us through this story, thank you. Cases like this deserve to be remembered, not sensationalized. And if you believe in exploring the mysteries that still haunt the world, subscribe. And join us next time as we uncover another case that refuses to fade away.